report. I'm Phil Shnieder. I'm an ex-government worker who worked 17 years in the Black Projects, otherwise known as the Skunk Works. I worked predominantly helping to design and build extremely deep underground military basing. Thank you. Give you a short overview of my background. I'm a structural engineer, both aerospace as well as military applications. Graduate of University of Missouri as well as University of Manchester, England. Primarily working in that university. That's about it for me. I worked in Vietnam, got torn to pieces, shot, whatever. Took 5 years to recuperate, came back, patched me up, so to speak. Went to work for Morrison Knudsen, and from Morrison Knudsen I worked also with EG&G, Bechtel, Aerospatiale of France. I also worked with Fiat for a while, cars by Fiat. I did a lot of work overseas, but predominantly my field was underground mountain basing, also submarine basing. I wrote several treatises on analyzing rock formations by grain structure, and this grain structure would yield a certain pattern, and that certain pattern could be used to analyze and chemically analyze and make special explosives that could be used to blast out large caverns underground, and even when there were caverns, you could still use shape charges to blast rock, although a lot of it was done by laser tunneling and drilling. I have a copy of a book here. I can't sell it, it's my only copy, but this fellow could corroborate with me. His name is Richard Souter, PhD. He can corroborate with me in regards to everything I'm talking about.
Who is it by?
Richard Souter, PhD.
Here's another man that
Okay, we need
couldn't
to
find the room. You need to give him your ticket.
I will.
And all that.
I guess I'll let you know that kind of the background of my father. My father was a German U-boat captain, responsible for the sinking of 141 Allied boats, and he got captured by the French, then turned over to 3rd Army, U.S., and then 3rd Army turned him over to Naval Intelligence, based out of Pensacola, Florida at the time. He later went to work also in Navy Black Projects. Maybe that's where I started, but it just worked out that way, I guess. Anyway, he worked for naval operations. He worked on the infamous Philadelphia experiment. He was involved heavily with that. In fact, I have some of his original notes. Get it here. Wait a second here. I thought I included them, but I guess I didn't. Strange, they were right here, too. Oh, here they are. These are some of the original notes that he had to go to school to learn them at Berkeley. And they were discussing things like element 104 and 105 way back in 1950, so obviously that school was a little more accelerated than schools normally of that particular day, both in atomic physics and also in time variancy. Anyway, my father, in continued to work in the U.S. Navy up until a couple of years before he died. He died 2 years ago, 1993, May of 93. But his main contribution, other than the Philadelphia experiment, was that he was one of the principal engineers of the first nuclear submarine, the USS Nautilus. And he worked with Hyman Rickover on that project to its fullest, from start to finish. He helped design the nuclear reactor, he helped design the metals, the containment vessel. He did all the machining of the uranium pellets that were used. He designed the hull predominantly and some of the graving docks, and so he was a major contributor as such. Such today that even his ideas in air conditioning and filtration are still used today in all nuclear submarines in the United States. So, that's so much for my father. He taught me a lot. He's a pretty silent fellow over time. He told me that I shouldn't work in the black projects in the desert regions. Of course, I told him, I'm sorry, I have to work for a living. And in the early 60s, mid-60s, construction work didn't pay really tremendously. And that's where I got the start. And one thing led to another. And when I went over to Vietnam, I got 10 times what a normal construction worker would get. But then the risk was pretty great too. And when I got hurt and recuperated some 5 years later, I got hurt in 1970, and by 1975 I was bouncing around again. And so at that time I went to work for a number of contractors who were primarily underground base builders. And of course, I might give you a brief overview. The first underground bases were basically old gold mines. Just the tunnels were already there. The first missile base, as a matter of fact, I believe it was in northern Montana. It was an old gold and silver mine. And the missiles are still in the old air shafts. The air shafts are re-drilled out and everything. And actually, they made a semi-hardened missile base out of an old gold mine, which is kind of unique, seeing the laser. Well, basically the main part of the talk will deal with what I faced underground. Is there anybody here that is in the frame of mind that they can't take gore or that kind of thing? If there is, there might be a problem because I'm going to get rather graphic.
I don't like it, but I can take it.
Okay, I'll tone it down a bit, but obviously, this workshop basically is everything that I missed in the main talk yesterday, and of course it's pretty hard to cram 3.5 or 4 hours talk in 50 minutes. I've divided a talk into three topics. I'm going to talk about dumb bases, deep underground military bases, call them dumb bases. Right now there are 131 of them, 129 are fully operational. Each one averages about 4¼ cubic miles hollowed out underground at an average depth of 5,000 feet down. Now, of course, some of them are shallower, some of them are deeper. They're strategically located. They were initially built to protect the President of the United States and the government in general, the federal government as well as the political government. Somehow the sheer number of 129 bases with basically the size of a medium-sized U.S. city is kind of unfathoming when you're dealing with maybe only 10,000 people in government that would be saved during a nuclear holocaust or war. So obviously these bases have other ulterior means. Some of them have already been used to in-house alien beings. Our government chooses not to let this out to the public for two reasons. The first main reason is that they don't want to panic the public. And their second main reason is that they don't want the public to know the alien agenda. My first part of my talk will be talking predominantly about the alien agenda and what it means for us on planet Earth. And it's going to get pretty graphic. The alien agenda basically is thusly. Aliens of 11 distinct races have been arriving here on Earth in mass since 1946, predominantly, and maybe earlier. Actually, probably the Bikini Island was one humongous underwater UFO base, or basically flying disc base, and that was known in the early 1940s. I think it was March of 1940 it was known that there was a number of this activity at that time. The Japanese, before we got into war with them, they had a number of problems with flying balls of light, as they called them, or divine second wind, as they also called them. They thought they were godlike. However, the gods don't come down and murder the populace, and so their idea of such ended rather abruptly. They became rather frightened after they declared war with us, hoping that if they lost the war, and this is strictly skeptical at this point in time because I've heard this from only 3 different sources within the U.S. Navy, that if we captured enough territory, maybe we could lick them, and that would solve their problem. But although that's pretty skeptical, can't prove that one way or not. The alien agenda basically is to take over planet Earth by another race of beings, or races of beings. The U.S. government has known about this alien agenda at least since early Hitlerian times, probably as early as 1933. The reason for that is the Third Army, under Patton and others, just afterwards had allured that there was some other agenda other than World War II that was an immediate threat to the people of this planet. In fact, General Douglas MacArthur was one time quoted in saying the very next war, and this is toward the close of World War II in 1945, he actually was quoted in saying, the next war we have will be not from people of Earth, but it will be from people, the World War, talking about, or worse, will be from races from the stars. And of course, this spawned a lot of speculative science fiction writing and that kind of thing like that. He was always, from then on, he was kind of looked at as a doddering old fool. He was a very visionary man, saying the least. If anything, he knew about the alien agenda in World War I times. Let me go further back in history. The first UFOs seen and occupants seen in caves and in and around Truth and Consequences, New Mexico, were spotted by U.S. Army cavalry in 1909. So this is a little earlier than most people have thought. Supposedly U.S. cavalry had come across they were chasing some bandits, and we chased them in this area, and there was these caves, and they were rather highly infested with aliens and what they call